Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime talk with Niall Boylan.
Ireland's classic hits radio.
All right, welcome back, and thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. Now, we want to talk about gender quotas in politics. And the issue of quotas in politics is one that causes much debate. In 2012, the Oireachtas adopted a law obliging political parties to select at least 30% of women candidates and 30% male candidates. Now, they had to say that, of course. There's always going to be 30% male candidates. But they said that at the time because obviously they didn't want the law to sound discriminatory. To contest general elections, the threshold was raised to 40% from 2023 onwards. If the quota is not met, political parties will lose 50% of their state funding they receive annually to run their operations. And that's money they essentially get, you know, for elections, for posters or administration, for staffing and all that kind of thing. Even the smaller parties get it. Now, it's said that gender quotas pave the way for equality in politics, but some people disagree. And they believe it forces a situation where you're essentially looking for women to run in the election, you know, who might not even want to run. You're just doing it to fill a quota. It's like, you know, if you said to a job, you have to hire, say, 50% of your staff must be female. You would hire female staff who may not even be qualified for the job because you have to, you know, fulfill a quota. But the argument is that it has encouraged women who may not have thought about running for politics before to run because they have that opportunity because political parties are looking for women. Now, there is some of the laughable facts about this, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. But I want to know if you agree with it, of forced gender quotas in politics, in workplaces, whatever it is. But let's stick primarily to politics. Because according to Micheál Dan tonight on RTE, it looks like now, the general election, there were two bills passed tonight. The finance bill and the gambling bill were passed tonight. The hate speech bill wasn't, by the way, for those who are interested. But two bills were passed tonight in the Dáil. And the government is tidying up its 5-year tenure as the government. They have a few bills just to run through over the next couple of weeks. But here's the thing. We did predict that the general election would be around the 15th of November. It's looking more likely now it'll be the 23rd, according to rumours within the Dáil tonight. And these seem to be pretty good rumours now. It will be the 23rd of November or the first week in December. So the general election might be a week later than we initially thought. So it's looking like the end of November, start of December. And will we have 30 or 40% female candidates in the election? Probably not. Because you can't control with gender quotas the amount of female independent candidates you might have. You can control it within a party because you can reduce party funding. But I want to know if you agree with the idea of gender quotas. One person who doesn't agree is a female candidate, Councillor Linda Corsi from Clondalkin LEA, and she will be running this year, contesting the general election, but doesn't necessarily agree with gender quotas. And I'm going to talk to Vicky Barron, by the way, who agrees, and she ran also for the local elections too. So stay there, please, Vicky. Let me just come to Councillor Linda De Corsi if I can first. Linda, hi, how are you?
Good, Niall, how are you?
Good. Linda, the idea behind it was, you know, there was a time where there were very few females in politics. So the idea behind, you know, gender quotas was to try and, you know, encourage more women to run, you know, so we have a more balanced society where we have male and female input. Was that such a bad thing?
It's a lot of these things. The idea is sort of noble and good. And I mean, as a woman, obviously, I know I'm as capable of doing anything, you know, mentally as well as a man. You know, like, you know, men and women are intelligent, you know, equally. You know, there's no difference in our ability to rationalise, etc. Some of us may be a bit more emotional.
So looking at some of the men in the Dáil at the moment, by the way, maybe I'd prefer a few more women, but go on, yeah.
So, but I think, I mean, like, I think it's actually very regressive. I think encouraging more women to get involved is great. I think making the space more accessible for both men and women, where women feel like if they really want to run, like I ran because I was fed up with the way the country was being run, you know, nothing to do with
that's normally why people run. They get frustrated.
Yes, exactly.
People get frustrated and they feel they want to do something about it. Yeah.
But I think it's regressive because it basically, like, so you have to have 40% of the candidates female to actually get your full funding. And if you don't have that, then you don't get all your funding. And so are we in a situation where you're just kind of throwing candidates in there just because they're a woman, or is it actually the best person for the job? You know, and so to me, this is where it gets very tricky, that like you're kind of looking for the woman to make up the 40%, you know, instead of actually running the best person for the job. Like Eddie Hobbs, you know, Eddie, he's running in Clare for Independent Ireland, and I suggested to him that he ran as Edwina, you know, early on.
You identify as a woman, okay.
Just because you know, you can't legally do that anyway. He chose not to, fair enough. But
Okay, well, that's his choice, yeah.
But yeah, no, I do think it's regressive, because I think it's maybe then putting people forward who actually don't want to do it. Or I've spoken to women who were put forward as candidates and they were the token female, and they're very angry about it because now they see that they were just used. And so again, that's not good. I mean, who is the best person for the job? Who will do what needs to be done? Who will say what needs to be said? And I think
would we have,
you know,
I mean, look at the amount of females we have now compared to, say, 2010, right? So would we have as many females now if we didn't have gender quotas? I mean, there are women who may not have thought about it too much, but they're encouraged by a political party because they need a quota. They run, they get elected, and all of a sudden they're in the job, and maybe they do a good job, and they go, yeah, this was always for me. I should have done this years ago. So maybe from that point of view, is it good? No, you don't think so?
Well, it's as I said, to encourage more women is good, but to put a quota on it is not good, because it's unhealthy. So, like, say you have, you know, 35% women, you know, candidates who you believe are the best candidates for the job. Then the government says that's not good enough. You have to have an extra 5% or you don't get your funding. I think it's just very unfair, because then you're forced to look for more women, even though you might have 5 really good guys who are really passionate about their area and really good at their job. You know, I just think it's very unfair.
Well, let me go to Vicky Barron. Vicky, hi, how are you?
How are you, Niall? How are you?
Good. Vicky, now I heard from somebody during the week, and I'll name no names, of a political party who are looking currently for women at the moment, and was talking to a friend of mine and said, do you know any women that want to run? It's not that important, you know, if they get elected or not. We just want their name on the ticket. So that's what's happening when you have quotas. You get people just putting women down for the sake of it, who probably have no chance of being elected, who are not really interested in running, but they'll do it, you know, just to get the quotas. I mean, that doesn't make sense, does it?
No, that doesn't make sense at all. But that's because the quota isn't robust enough. I mean, I've heard everything Linda has said there, and I do agree with it. I mean, I don't believe that party funding should be dependent on that you have to put forward a certain gender. But I do believe that if you make it that it was 50%, and you have to run half your candidates men and half your candidates women in any party, you would see a different calibre or a different cohort of women who wouldn't allow themselves to be the token woman. I mean, like, the challenge is, if it's only at 30% or 40%, we still feel like we're just the token woman. And that's what it's out there.
Yeah, but if you made it, but we're struggling at 40%. If you made it 50%, it should be worse.
40% because it's still tokenism for women. If it was 50% or it was more robust at that 50%, parties would invest possibly more in women.
But is it not a case
in getting elected, because they'd have a better chance of getting elected?
But is it not a case, Vicky, that there are occupations we know, say for example, construction is mainly men. You know, nursing is mainly women. Childcare is mainly women. Engineering is mainly men. So there are things that, you know, people, the genders, you know, gravitate towards. Maybe politics is one of those things that, okay, we're changing it a bit, and that's a good thing. But maybe just not enough women are interested or want to do it.
But why don't women want to do it, Niall? That is the question. It's because if you can't see it, you can't be it. So if you don't see women as represented, and I'll just talk, because I ran in the local elections in Wexford, and I was part of the See Her Elected. I went for interest, really, because I am doing quite a lot in my county and in my town. And yes, what I don't have are the skills to put myself out there and say, yeah, hey, look at me. I'm one of these silent, quiet people who go on all the committees, get the work done, and make changes silently. And it's a very different skill set you need to get elected than the skills that you need to actually be effective in government, either at local or national level. So when you look around, like, and I do need to say, I'll clarify, I was with Labour in Wexford. We ran 2 women and 1 man. And my colleagues got elected. I didn't. That is absolutely fine. I'm still doing all my work. But I would really feel that people who are like me, who are very invested, have put a lot of time into community work, who have done a lot for their own education and professional development, and who would be very effective in a local council or in a national, in government. We don't want to put ourselves there, firstly because of the trauma of campaigning and all of the political BS and the stuff that comes at you.
I know. I've been through that.
And also, yes. But also it's still, you're there as a 40%. Women are every bit as good as their male counterparts.
No, nobody's suggesting they're not, by the way. Now, mind you, there's some of the male counterparts I wouldn't have in elections anyway. But I mean, there's nobody doubting that women are good.
No, and I hear that. But the fact that it's still only 40%, it's still tokenism. It really is, because I think a different type of person will put themselves up.
So what are you suggesting? Okay, so you're suggesting it should be 50-50, right? But it says so how do you enforce that if you're saying there would be no punishment, i.e. you wouldn't lose half your funding?
I think parties, and they should be encouraged. Like enforcing.
But just morally obliged to do it? Morally obliged to do it, or called out if they don't do it?
Other jurisdictions in other countries, they have voluntary quotas where they seek out and they say, right, as a party, we're putting forward 50% women, 50% men. And I think what you would see then, you would see the change. Like at the moment, like you need to look back on our government. There's 100 women elected max in the last 100 years of the Dáil, maybe.
Yeah, probably.
And you look at all the men that have been elected. So we need a draft.
Well, yeah, but there was a time up to kind of the mid to late 90s that it was primarily 95% men. So but that's changed drastically. Linda, I mean, you've listened to what Vicky had to say. Okay, maybe she doesn't agree so much with punishing parties with the 50% state funding, but she believes that it should be increased to 50%, not 40%. And we should be encouraging women, I suppose, from the very outset, maybe in schooling, that they should get into politics, or politics would be a good thing to get into.
Yeah, it's interesting. I suppose I'm the only female elected representative in Independent Ireland, and I do not feel like it's the token woman. Like I don't feel like that at all. I was elected on merit. Lots of other women ran. I actually don't know how many, and they didn't get elected. At the end of the day, the electorate votes for who they want to vote for, and so I suppose I just don't like that whole language around tokenism, and because I just feel that's actually putting us in a box that we know we shouldn't be in. We're very capable, and as she was saying, like lots of women do so much work behind the scenes, and we're really good. We multitask. But I mean, I was just at a meeting in Newcastle about a secondary school that Department of Education don't want to build, even though they need to build it. And there was a guy there who was on the Tidy Towns committee, and then there was a lady there who had done some organising, and they were working together to kind of bring this meeting together, to have the councillors come in and discuss with the parents. So I think men and women work well together, and I think we work well together when we're not looking at the differences between us and saying, okay, who is the best person for the job? Because some people will be happier to work behind the scenes, and other people will be happier to kind of get out there. And I mean, I've never really wanted to get out there, but I just felt like there was a need, because I just wasn't happy with what I was
I'm assuming
seeing.
you're running in the general election, by the way, which we now believe is probably.
I am running in the general election. Yes, post is very speak. So yeah, I am. So it's it's tough, and it's hard, and people say nasty things about you, and you get a few nasty messages and whatever. But I mean, at the end of the day,
now I don't buy into this whole thing about there's a level of preciousness. Sorry, Vicky, I'll talk to you about that. And I know female candidates in the past have said, oh, it's tough, and, you get a lot of bad messages, and Twitter goes mad, and they say nasty things. I mean, I know all that because I went through it in the European elections, and people do say horrible, nasty, untrue things about you. But I suppose, Vicky, you got to have a thick skin. If you're going to be a politician, you have to have a thick skin, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You can't go into politics and be all precious about yourself. You know what I mean? You just can't.
No point in that at all. No. I suppose I think something needs to change. Like, I mean, I suppose I'd recommend it. Like, why can't we try it once and bring it up to the 50% and see what happens? I mean, we're all talking
you're saying what will happen. Let's say next year we bring it up to the 50%. I'm kind of agreeing with Linda to some degree that they're struggling at 30%. And I know one particular party who are really struggling to get to 30%. And it's not because of the they want to try, and they just cannot find enough women. I mean, at this moment in time, out there, in the population, there are more men that want to run in politics than women. That's just a fact, unfortunately. Now, hopefully that can change in the future, but at this moment in time, that just isn't there. So by forcing these kind of quotas, it's like when you said they brought this in America. It's called affirmative action. Way back in the 1980s. And it was in relation to race, it was in relation to women, that you had to hire a certain amount of African Americans, you had to hire a certain amount of women. And it just didn't work because you're essentially hiring people just because they were African American, just because they were women, just to fulfill a quota.
Absolutely. Listen, I hear you, Niall, absolutely. And I just want to say, look, I'm a primary principal as well. And I'm the first female principal of my school in 175 years. And I got that job on merit. There was no quotas or anything involved. Yeah. But the thing is, it is the chance. So when you run for election, I know you're kind of saying, oh, well, could I, mightn't I? At a mandated 40%, there's still the chances of winning or getting elected are smaller. Mm-hmm. And it's about how to make it more attractive for women to go into. And until, it has taken so long to get us to where we are, but we're still nowhere near where we need to be. And our government, if we had more women in it, I do believe that we'd have a different focus on a lot of policies that would be better for the country. And as a teacher, I'm going early intervention, get all of the services in for the under fives, invest in our early childcare, all of that. But instead, we don't see that emphasis there. And we know that if we build there, we will save all of the problems that are coming at everybody.
No, and I agree. Women have a lot to bring to the table and they look at things to a different perspective. Obviously,
Can I just jump in here and say we have currently a Minister for Justice and we have a Minister for Education who are both women, and I think they're both doing a horrendous job. Nothing personal.
I'm not going to argue with either of those points.
I mean, just because someone is a woman does not necessarily mean they will do a better job, and just because someone is a man.
But I do take Vicky's point that it does put a different perspective on things, because generally speaking, women have a different instinct. I'm going to sound fierce sexist here by saying they may have a maternal instinct, so they think more of the children, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, you one would think so, but clearly we see that's not with the two ministers I just mentioned. So I mean, the thing is, the world is not perfect, and the world is it's just some people are more sensitive than others, and some people just you have to have a thick skin. But I don't know. I just feel if we just focused on what was important, who is the best person for the job. When I was a teenager in the 80s, and next door we had the Queen and we had Margaret Thatcher. So the two leaders in the land were both women. So maybe because that was kind of in my formative years, I don't see that women were never involved in politics. I know we didn't have them here, but we had Mary Robinson. She was president, and then we had Mary McAleese. Mm-hmm. So in all fairness, I think we haven't had as many, but we've had women leaders who have in their role behaved themselves in an amazing way and done our country proud. So I just don't like the quota. I'm all for let's and I agree, let's get it into the schools more, and let's encourage more girls if that's what they want to do, to find your true calling, find your truth path. But forcing a quota, because also now they're talking about diversity in politics, and it's it's just.
Well, let me actually just throw that one at Vic. Actually, I'm going to throw that one at. I have another caller here, Bredeen Murphy from New Ross, who's running in the general election as well. Bredeen, hi, how are you?
Hi, good night to you.
Good night. Well, I'll ask you first about gender quotas, and I'm going to come to the other thing that Pascal O'Donoghue was talking about last night. Do you agree with gender quotas?
Look, I suppose they're almost controversial, but I like what they do, and that is to introduce a sharp shock to the political system that makes change happen quickly. Look, in our last local elections, we saw stagnation. We did not see an increase in women representations in our local chamber in our local chambers. So, look, democracy to me is neither healthy or sustainable if we exclude the voices and experiences of over half of our population. So I like what they do. I understand and I appreciate that they are controversial, but I think change is happening too slow, and we need to introduce something radical so that we see that change happen quicker.
Okay, so at the moment you lose 50% of your state funding if your political party doesn't run at least 40% candidates female. The latest, of course, from Pascal O'Donoghue is talking about the next local elections, which is not for another 5 years, but he's putting together a fund for minorities and for women to run in the elections. Now, to me, that's electoral interference. I don't think you can put it any other way. In other words, we'll happily pay and give money for posters and everything else for women and, minorities or whatever it is, but not for men. So that, to me, that's kind of discrimination. It's electoral interference. You're essentially encouraging a certain cohort of society and funding them to run for election, but not the other part of society. Is that fair?
No. Well, I suppose what I would comment there is, I think it's also important that we are selecting women that are in winnable seats. And look, you can put it that it's discrimination, discriminatory against men. But I do believe we need to start looking at how we get equal representation.
But don't just brush that off now, Breedeen. You just said that. We can't say it's discriminatory against men and then just pass on from that point like nothing happened. It is. And there was a case, was it in Dunleary, going back about 8 or 9 years ago? There was a man passed up for a position on the ticket because they needed a female to make up the 40%. He got much higher votes in the local elections. He did much better than her, and he didn't get the opportunity to run with the party. I can't remember exactly who it was now, and somebody will remind me, because they needed to fill a female position. I mean, to me, that's discrimination, isn't it?
But it has also worked the other way, where, if we go to a convention and the majority of members in a room are men, the likelihood is that the male candidate will get selected. So that works in a lot of ways. So I think it's right across the board, and I think it's unfair to say it's discrimination either way. I think, look, the reality is, a lot of the parties are still, the majority of members are men. So if you go to convention, it is very, very difficult as a female to win at that convention.
But there is a level of discrimination, because let's say in the next general election or the next local elections, I run and you run. You'll get a few quid from the government. I won't. So would that be is that fair? Because we're both, citizens. We both should be treated equally according to the Constitution of Ireland. So is that technically fair that you get, or if you were a minority, if you are, I don't know, an immigrant to the country or whatever it happens to be, that you'd get a few quid, out of this grant or this fund that Pascal Donoghue wants to make available? To me, that just seems like, I sound like Donald Trump now, election interference. But it is electoral interference, isn't it?
I honestly don't think it is, and that's look at and you have your opinion on it, and I have mine, and I think both are probably valuable in a sense, but I do think we have to stop at nothing to get more women, and if that's support, and also you must remember, look, I'm in a very privileged position in Wexford here, and I have 2 very young children, and I have great support around me in terms of childminding, but that isn't, a lot of women are not in that same position, and I have to acknowledge that, and I have to recognise that. I got asked to run in 2019, and I had a long, hard think about it. And in my district, I'm the only woman, and I have been the only woman for a very long time, if you look back. And I looked at it, and there was no one who represented me and my views and my values. But I had to take a huge hit financially. I had to pay for childminding because my husband works. I had to pay for childminding on my maternity leave. And that was a choice that I made. But I would like to think that there would be more women in my position that would be encouraged through this to then, go ahead and go for politics, because we don't have enough representation of women, certainly young women as well. It's just not there.
Well, let me just go back to Linda on that. Linda, Breedeen makes a good point there. It's less, I suppose it's more difficult for women to run for election because, generally speaking, in the family, women are the first ones to run when the child is sick in school. Women are the first one, or women might have to breastfeed after pregnancy. So there's a lot of difficulties in, being a politician and a full-time job when you're a woman. So we need to alleviate those hurdles, and gender quotas make sure that we're not discriminating against women because of those hurdles, because we already know that employers discriminate against women anyway based on the fact they're of childbearing age. So let's not do that in politics. Is that not what the ladies are saying, that, we need to assist women because women have a lot of hurdles to overcome?
I mean, to a certain extent, obviously, it's just the nature of being a woman, and bearing children. But I mean, in South Dublin County Council, there are 40 councillors and 19 are women. So I think we are a bit of an anomaly in the country. But I mean, we're almost as close to 50-50 as 50% as you can get. But I mean, I have lots of female friends in the corporate world, very high up in various levels of things, and none of them liked the idea of gender quotas because they all got where they were on merit. They worked hard, they sacrificed, you know, they chose the lives they chose, and they've done really well. And I think, you know, if I get elected as a TD, I want to get elected because of what I'm standing for. And, you know, and I've had a few people say to me, oh, you know, I'm delighted you're a woman and you're running. And I'm like, that's grand. But what's more important is what I'm standing for, and not just, you know, the fact that I'm a woman and not a man. And so I do get that as a woman. It is harder at a certain stage of your life when your children are young. I do get that. I suppose I'm in my 50s, so, and I don't have kids, but I mean, you know, so I was at a stage in my life where I had the time to run, and I knew if I got elected, I could still keep my other job, which is teaching Pilates, you know, and running. So I was in a position where I had the time to do it. I probably wouldn't have done it if I didn't have the time. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I get that's not possible for everybody. So
how do you feel about the possibility of getting elected in the general election? You won't be having time for your Pilates then, let me tell you.
I have to give that up, and it's kind of like, I mean, I enjoyed my life before getting elected, and I mean, I am enjoying the council job, but you know, it's I just feel like things have to change. Like, I mean, obviously, as you know, ran on immigration because it's such a massive issue in Dublin Midwest, you know, and that's what I'll be the main thing I'm running on in the general. But you know, I'm not focusing on the fact that I'm a woman. If someone's happy that I'm a woman, then that's grand. If someone's not happy I'm a woman, well, you know, such is life. But
sorry, Brídín, I just want to ask Brídín, are you running as an independent in the general election?
No, I'm running with a party, Fine Gael.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I do agree. Look at that, you know, and I do agree with Linda there that I think it's really important that we get elected on our merits. I certainly don't want to get elected just because I'm a female, and I suppose the risk that you run, and you give, I suppose, ammunition almost sometimes to opposition to say, oh, well, she just got added because she's a female. And it reduces or removes your credibility. And
But the problem is, Brídín, women are being added because they're women. And I told you already, I spoke to somebody during the week who got a phone call who's in the political sphere, and I won't say which party, but it wouldn't surprise me. And the idea or the notion was, we need more women. Do you know anybody we can put on the ticket? Look, it doesn't matter if they're going to get elected or not. We just need to have some women so we can get the funding. And I think that's sad when you're doing that. And so there are women who are going to run with no possibility of being elected. You know, a few posters up, but it's to have a name down on a piece of paper just so they get their 50%.
Yeah, and look, that is the absolute issue with gender quotas. And as I said earlier, you know, we have to put pressure on political parties and hold them to account that they select women that are in winnable seats.
But you're saying that to me, but that's great. And Brídín, you sound really dedicated to the job, as does Vicky, you know, who ran for the local elections, as does Linda. And I've met Linda, by the way. She is absolutely dedicated to the job. So you all sound very dedicated to the job. But the point is, you're saying we have to do better, and it's up to we should make the political parties accountable, blah, 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 blah. But if they can't find women, what are they going to do? Like, if we're saying it's 40% at the moment, some people suggest it should be 50% because it used to be 30, now it's 40. And you can't literally find women who want to run, you know, who want to make that big step, because it is a big thing to run for election. You know, it's a big chunk of your life. I mean, what are they supposed to do? Just invent them? You know, you can't just make it up.
No, but I suppose, you know, we do need to start looking at removing the barriers that prevent women ever consider running for politics. I know Vicky, of course, Vicky is Wexford. And, you know, hi, Vicky, how are you? So, like, in Wexford, of the 34 councillors, 6 are women. And we didn't increase that in the last local elections. And, you know, I would like to just acknowledge our chief executive in Wexford County Council, who after the election, who was newly elected himself into the position, said he was bitterly disappointed to see, after everything that we've tried to do, women ran, we had candidates, but they're just not getting elected.
Well, when you say you're bitterly disappointed, that's democracy, isn't it? That's the electorate. That's nothing to do with the political parties. That's the electorate, isn't it?
It is.
Can I come in there?
Yeah, sorry, Vicky, go ahead.
Apologies now for talking over you all, but like in Wexford, we only had 20% of women come out to vote. And the question, it comes back to this real chicken and egg. If women aren't in and seen and visible in politics, women sometimes don't feel they have a voice, so therefore they won't go out and vote. So we need to get more women into politics. And I think, unfortunately, the better candidates or people who do want to run for election with a gender quota will know that they are genuinely sought after, and they're not going to be that we need a woman. I do think you will get a different type of person who will say, well, I now have a chance of being elected, and I'm not the token, because there are hundreds of women who are very, very talented at their jobs, and they just don't want the hassle of probably not getting elected because of the electoral system and the way it runs at the moment.
Are you running, Vicky, in the general election? Are you going to?
No, I'm not running in the general election. I have a school to run and I have lots of children and the world's to change one child at a time. Maybe next time, but not at the moment.
Yeah, well, just before you all go there, let me just go to Stephen as well. Stephen, hi. Let me just get a male voice in. Stephen, hi. How are you?
How's it going, everybody?
You've been listening to the ladies
there.
It's
a really interesting discussion.
Do you agree with gender quotas?
I think, broadly speaking, they're a very blunt tool, but they were a necessary thing to change the political landscape, because the ladies are right. It wasn't going to change anywhere near fast enough when you have a culture that is very used to just saying, no, sure, John, we'll put you on instead of Breda, because,
You're a bloke.
Nobody's going to vote for Breda. Yeah, exactly. Just like Breda can just, stay there.
You stay home, mind the kids. Yeah.
Kind of a thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, that's the culture. It's pale, male, and stale. And
now you're starting to sound like Maria Walsh now. Yeah, but go on.
I don't blame a lot of women for not wanting to run for politics, especially when you look at, some of the scandals and the things that have happened in Leinster House over the last 20 years, and the fact that, they are going to be judged a lot more than the men. The clothes no. All of these other kinds of things.
No, I don't think so.
Nobody's going to judge me for turning up in a suit 3 days a week or 5 days a week, or the same suit for 2 weeks. A woman turns up in clothing for, more than one event or something like that in the same clothing. Somebody's going to judge her for it.
Yeah, but primarily, can I just point out, primarily it's other women that will judge her, by the way. Can I just say, it's usually not men.
Well, the men will be eyeing her up anyway.
Well,
unless they're of my persuasion.
Yeah, well, unless they're of your persuasion. But Stephen, I understand what you're saying. It is a blunt instrument and it is a blunt law. And it kind of maybe doesn't deal with the problem too well. And there may be an alternative way of dealing with it. Now, Vicky had suggested it should be 50%, but there shouldn't be a punishment.
I'm inclined to agree that it should be 50-50. And maybe there shouldn't be a punishment. But the whole thing is the state is funding political parties, big and small, in order to be able to run. So, unfortunately, the state, the likes of Independent Ireland, Aim to Renew, Stock Dems, all these other people probably wouldn't be able to attract as much funding as the likes of Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, Sinn
No,
Féin.
they don't, and I know that they don't.
So the government is there. The Oireachtas funds them partly, not entirely, obviously, I would imagine, to be able to make up the difference and to be able to compete with the bigger boys.
Well, but they don't get, now, in fairness, they don't get that much funding, because I've spoken to some of the smaller parties and they don't get a huge amount of funding. The government parties get a lot more funding because they have a lot more candidates.
Well, it's proportional to the size of their candidates.
I mean, Linda, I don't want to talk specifically about Independent Ireland as such, because that would be unfair of me to ask you that question. But from your experience, I mean, you've seen female candidates run the local elections in Dublin. Has there been as many interested in running as men? Just your own personal experience.
I suppose I wouldn't really be able to say, because I was running here and I know there's one other lady in my LEA. There's 7 of us in the Clondalkin LEA, and there's one other lady. So I didn't interact with many other women before the election. It was only other ones with Independent Ireland. But I think the challenges that face women who are running for the first time, especially in a smaller party, are the same as the challenges that face men. That nobody knows, trying to get your name out there. Possibly it is a bit more of, because we are more, naturally more emotional for the most part. So you do think more, what will people think of me? That definitely is something that I think we probably have to overcome more than a lot of men, not all men. So I think that would definitely be an issue. But I know the candidates that we have selected for our general election are men and women. They're all that we believe the best people for the job, and we definitely haven't taken anybody on.
Yeah, but you're not going to tell me anything to the contrary of that. You're hardly going to tell me, we're running lads or we're running women just for the sake of it.
No, but because we're not at the quota. I don't know where we are. We're maybe 5 close to 30%, but we're nowhere near the 40% quota. So it is a challenge. But as I said, I just was kind of focused on the whole.
Well, I don't even think there's one of the bigger parties for sure. I'm not going to say which one, they're not at the quota either. And they're desperate to find women. And this is the problem, Vicky. And I'm talking about one of the bigger parties. I'm not talking about Independent Ireland or Ain 2 or the smaller parties who don't have to attract a huge amount because they're not going to run many candidates. But some of the bigger parties, one of them in particular at the moment, can't find enough women. I mean, and it's literally a case of, do you know any women who'll put their name down? I don't care if they get elected. It doesn't matter. We'll stick a few posters up on polls. Once it looks like they're running, we'll get our 50%. And that just is bonkers, Vicky.
Absolutely bonkers. And that is why if you move up the quota, it becomes more robust. It becomes more fair. And like...
I'm grappling with that in my head, by the way, every time you say that to me.
I would have to say I am too. I'm
struggling with that.
What I mean by that is basically, if it stays at 40%, it can feel like tokenism. You still have a lesser chance of winning or getting elected. You have that lesser chance. Whereas if it's 50-50, there's a bigger value placed on you. And
yeah,
you
but if you can't,
different type of
but if we can't currently find 40% of the candidates female to run, what chance have we got of getting 50%? You know what I mean? We can't. It's not a case of we don't want 40% to run.
My dog just arrived into my room. Sorry,
but
I know that. I know that.
So, sorry, what did you say? Somebody just drove into your room?
Sorry, no. I'm trying to get the dog out. The dog is just arrived in.
I had a vision of a car coming through your front window there for a second.
No. Sorry about that.
Although that would have been great radio, can I just say, Vicky?
I'll do my best next time.
Stephen, do you get the point that Vicky is making? That if you increase the quota to 50-50, it doesn't make it sound like tokenism?
Yeah, it from an optics point of view, it would look like a more realistic general split, you know. And the idea would not be that you find a load of women to just make up the numbers. I would imagine, or the way I would do it if I was running a political party is, and by the way, all of these candidates that are male must have an awful lot of women in their teams that they can pull from, you know. So this whole thing of not being able to find enough women for a party sounds a bit like you haven't tried hard enough. But my point was that if it's 50-50 and I have, 10 women and 10 men running for a candidate in Dublin Bay North or whatever it is, and I have to pick one of each of them, I pick one out of the 10 of each of them that we think are going to be the best ones to win the seat, But also, and I was only talking about this earlier today with somebody, all parties will move themselves around the electoral map around the country to make it look better or to fill a gap or to do this, that or the other, or if they think they can win a seat better if there's a candidate in Dublin Bay North that's going to have a better chance of winning the seat in Dublin Bay South, they'll move themselves to Dublin Bay South, or the party will move them because they have better chances of winning.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Linda or Vicky, whoever that was. So go ahead.
If, on that, you've got 10 men and 10 women. So what if, say, out of the 20 people, the two best candidates for the job are women? Or what if they're both men? It should be the best person for the job. And this is where...
I wholly agree with you.
No, but this is where when you're looking at okay, well, you have to have 4 women, 6 men. This is where what if it's 3 women and 7 men, or what if it's 7 women and it shouldn't be about that shouldn't be the primary thing. And this is what it's becoming. And it's just, to me, it's very regressive because it's not now just about men and women. Now next, Pascal's grand new plan is going to be,
giving money.
But also ethnic diversity and whatever that means. And
by the way, I don't know. By the way, can I just point out, Pascal has said he would like to set up a fund to give to women, minorities, etc., to run in the next local elections. Now, by the way, Stephen, I don't know if that includes members of the LGBTQ community, right? So would it be fair if it did include them, for example, to give you money, to throw you a 10 grand fund or whatever it is to run for election, but not throw me anything? Do you know what I mean?
No, I don't think that's fair at all. No.
Yeah.
I think it's like, who is the best person for the job? That we have to just get back to
Okay, listen, hang on for a second because I have to take a break. Stephen, please stay with me. Linda, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Linda de Courcy, who's running I keep forgetting, Linda, where are you running again? Dublin
Midwest.
Okay, for Independent Ireland, and she'll be running the next election. Also, thanks to Breedine Murphy, who was on there a few minutes ago, who's also running a general election as well, and Vicky Barron in Wexford, who ran in the local elections, but's gone back to looking after children in the primary school. Stephen, stay with me, and I'm going to come to Brian after the break. All right, stay with me there for a second, Stephen, if you can. Let me go to Brian as well. Brian, hi, how are you?
Well, how you doing?
Good. Brian, gender quotas generally in politics, is it a good idea or a bad idea?
Are we talking strictly politics or in general?
Well, I suppose in general. I mean, they tried to bring it in America as affirmative action in the workplace, but it didn't kind of work out too well.
In general, it's very simple. You take 100 women, 100 men. Let's say 80% of the women are better than 20% of the men. What do? You employ 80% of the men. It's simple as fuck.
Best person for the job.
Exactly. I mean, your earlier speaker said it. I mean, you take the best.
But how do you? But here's the problem with politics. How do you know the best person for the job when the people are not running? The problem we've always had in politics in this country up to now, well, certainly up to the last 10 years, is women weren't taking the opportunity to run, so we never got the opportunity to find out how good they were.
That's entirely up to women. Do you know what I mean? It's will. It's want. I mean, women will take up the mantle, hopefully. Mm-hmm. More, and it will equalise itself. You can't push people into wanting to do something. Women will take the mantle.
Well, you might not be able to push them into wanting to do something, but certainly you could take down some of the barriers, couldn't you?
Courage or whatever, I don't know, but women themselves will take the mantle. Eventually, it's like...
Okay, well, Stephen, is that a fair point? Look, why do we need to encourage them? They'll take the mantra eventually if they want to do it, or do we need to take down barriers, Stephen?
I think you take down barriers and you put out a path in front of them to say, if you would like to do this, here are the options, here we go. We will support you doing this. Eventually it would happen, but so many things will happen eventually.
But who's stopping them? Where is the barrier? I mean, who's...
As I said, there is typically, historically, a culture of male dominance within politics that...
Yeah, there has been.
Sure. Why would we put Breda up for election? Sure, nobody would vote for her. But we'll put Tom and John and things like that in instead. So things like that will change eventually, and it is changing thanks to the quotas. It's a stupid way to do it, but it is working. And as regarding my one out of every 10 people, just like that what I meant is across the entire country. You could have Fine Gael run only men in the entire Dublin constituency, but in Cork, Galway, Limerick, Laois, Waterford, Donegal, they have more women than men on all of their ballots. So on a national perspective, it balances the scales. And they get to 50-50.
Okay, listen, lads, unfortunately I've gone way over time. Marion, I'm not going to get you, but maybe I'll try and get you after the break just to finish this conversation. I do apologise, but I'm really late going into the news because it was an interesting conversation.
Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime Talk with Niall Boylan.
Ireland's Classic Hits Radio.